So, we're going to start a new unit. And the big thing that I want you to pay attention to is really how it gets written down. Because you came from 3 or 4 different math teachers last year, what we want to do in 7th grade, because there's only 2 enriched classes, is really make sure that the format in which you do the algebra looks like your algebra teacher is going to want. So while I know the process has been taught to you, we're going to be very, very picky about what it looks like because algebra is really cool. Math is really cool because no matter where you are in the world, it's done the same way. So it's a language that's very easily communicated. And so we really want to make sure we focus on what that form looks like. So the basic rules are to get the variable alone. That means on one side of the equal sign. Use inverse operations when moving a variable to the other side of the equal sign. And remembering that what you do to one side, you must do to the other. It's kind of like a teeter-totter. Whatever you do to one side of the equation, you have to do to the other so that everything remains in balance. So these are one-step equations. This is something that you should have seen before. But what I really want to focus on is that the form. All right. So here's my variable, x. It is not alone on this side of the equal sign. Oops. Parent comment to the bus. Parent comment to the bus. That's awkward because it's being added to 3. So the inverse operation of adding 3 is to subtract 3. And whatever you do to one side, you have to do to the other. You have to show it exactly like this. Positive 3 and negative 3 make 0. So the only thing left on the left side of the equal sign is x. And then on the right side, you consider these to be individual integers. So we have negative 27 and we have negative 3. We're going to put them together. We're going to add them. So we have the same signs, add and keep. So our answer to this equation is x is 30. I want to make sure, I'm going to do all the equations first, and then I'm going to go back and show you how to check them. So number 2, y is not alone. It's being subtracted by 27. The inverse of subtracting 27 is adding 27. Negative 27 and positive 27 makes 0. Y is now on by itself on the left. On the right, we have a negative 3 and a positive 27. They're different signs, so we're going to subtract and keep the sign of the one with more. That's a positive 24. All right. Number 3, x is not alone, this time because it's being multiplied by negative 3. Notice that negative 3 is what we call the coefficient. The opposite operation of multiply is divide. I'm not telling you to do the opposite of the negative 3. I'm asking you to do the opposite operation. So the opposite of multiplying is dividing. You always have to divide by the exact coefficient. So notice I'm dividing by negative 3, not positive 3, by negative 3. And the reason for that is negative 3 divided by negative 3 is positive 1, which means x is now alone. If I had negative 3 divided by positive 3, which is the inverse integer, I'd get negative 1. And this would translate to negative 1x in my equation, not positive 1x. That's why we have to do the opposite operation, but not the opposite integer. Now remember, a negative divided by a negative is a positive. So this is a positive 15. That's a little tricky in there because of that coefficient. I don't know how much you remember about two-step equations, but what I like to tell kids is to locate your variable, okay? And I like to sometimes put a box around it if I forget. you have to deal with what's not highlighted first. So I kind of cover up the variable, forget about it. And the inverse of adding 17 is subtracting 17. So you highlight your variable or put a box around it and deal with the other thing first. If you want to think of it this way, your order of operations, if you had all the numbers, you'd do the parentheses and the exponents and multiply, divide, add, subtract. When you are doing algebra, you undo the add, subtract first and work your way back up. You're like unwrapping the present for the unknown y. All right, so now we have y divided by 4 is equal to, same signs, add and keep, negative 30. The opposite of dividing is multiplying, and we show that like this, and we're going to multiply by the number that you're dividing by. Because if this were a fraction, 4 divided by 4, these would cancel, leaving y alone. And so we're going to multiply by the same thing over here to get negative 120. So it's important to remember when solving equations, you do the opposite of PEMDAS. Some of your teachers might have called it SADMAP. I don't like to. I just like to focus on my variable and do the inverse of the add or subtract first. And then when I just have one operation left, I do the inverse of the multiply or divide. All right, so you might want to pause the video and try this and then turn it back on to see how I do it. Here we go. I am going to put a box around my variable and notice that that term, that variable it's variables with, is being added to 3. So I'm going to subtract 3 from both sides. Positive 3 and negative 3 makes 0. So I have 2x equals different signs subtract. Opposite of multiplying by 2 is dividing by that exact coefficient, because 2 divided by 2 is 1, and this comes out to be 3. Next one, again, you can pause and try it on your own. I'm going to notice where my variable is, get rid of what's happening to that variable term first. I'm left with 3x equals 21. The opposite of multiplying is dividing, and I'm going to divide by that exact coefficient, giving me x equals 7. Okay? Before I go to the next page, I want to show you what a check looks like. So your check, I'm going to label it a check. And what I'm going to do is replace this x with what I think the answer is. So I'm going to rewrite that equation. Negative 30 plus 3 equals negative 27. And I'm going to do this problem. Negative 30 plus 3 is negative 27. And you have to show that both the sides are the same. When I was in school, my teacher gave me a little check. Yep, that's right, it checks. You can give yourself a little happy face. I don't care. But you need to show that what you get on the left is the same as what you get on the right. And I know that's frustrating to some of you, but that shows your balance beam. Okay, so I'm going to recopy this problem, but instead of y, I'm going to write 24 minus 27. Notice that the 27 is negative, and that's larger. So when I do this problem, I do get negative 3. Check. Here, again, I'm going to replace the x with 15. Remember that that means negative 3 times x. So this is negative 3 times 15 equals negative 45. I do this problem. I do get negative 45, so the two sides are equal. Check. I know it seems simplistic to you right now, but you can see that the problems are getting more complicated as we move on. So I'm going to replace the y with negative 120. divided by 4 plus 17 equals negative 13. Now that I have all the numbers, I'm going in order, what you know as PEMDAS. This is the order of operations. So parentheses, exponents, multiply, divide first. This gives you negative 30 plus 17. And negative 30 plus 17 is negative 13. So you do get that correct answer. Okay? Moving right along, let's check to see if I did this right. This is good for me because you guys know I make a lot of mistakes. This is 2 times 3, not 23, so be careful there. 6 plus 3 is indeed 9. So the two sides are matching, which means my answer is correct. Note, this is your answer, not this. This is just saying, yeah, your answer works in this problem. So I'm going to recopy, but I'm not going to write x. I'm going to do 3 times 7 plus 2 equals 23. That's 21 plus 2, which does give me 23. So again, I have a big old check. This format is extremely important. You know that in class we've talked a lot about different ways to do things. If you know enough about math, there's different pathways to get your correct answer. But algebra is algebra. It has to look exactly like mine. I become very picky during this time. Okay, I am going to notice where my variable is. It is being subtracted by 7, so I'm going to add 7 to both sides. That leaves me with negative 2y equals 10. I'm going to divide. Opposite of multiplying is dividing, and be careful here. You have to divide by that exact coefficient so that your negative 2 divided by negative 2 becomes a 1y. Y equals negative 5. And I'll do a nice check for that right now that I know how to do those. I'm going to replace y with parentheses. That's negative 2 times negative 5 minus 7 equals 3. Order of operations says to multiply first. So this is 10 minus 7, and 10 minus 7 is 3. So that's a check. That works. Okay. Notice where your variable is. It's over here this time. That's okay. I'm just going to get rid of what's happening to the variable, which is a positive 4. There's no sign in front of it, but if there's no sign, we assume it's positive. So we're going to subtract 4 from both sides. That's a bit of a trick that kids struggle with. 4 and negative 4 make 0, so I'm left with 1/5 r equals negative 5. And how do I get rid of multiplying by 1/5? There's 2 ways to do it. One way is to divide by 1/5. However, you know that when you're dividing, you have to copy, change, flip. And so a little shortcut that you could do when you are multiplying by a fraction would be to multiply by the reciprocal. So you could multiply by 5/1, which is the same as 5, because look, if you had to copy, change, flip, that's what you'd get anyway. So r equals negative 25. And I'm going to show my check because that was tricky, so I definitely want to check to make sure I'm right. 4 plus 1/5 times, I'm going to replace that with negative 25 equals negative 1. Order of operations says that I have to multiply first. So I have to do this first, not 4 plus, so be careful there. So I'm going to have 4 plus, I'm going to put this over 1. I can cancel here. 4 plus negative 5 is negative 1. So that hard work paid off. Again, please pause it and try these 2 on your own and then start it back up again. Identify where your variable is. Opposite of plus 8 is minus 8. I'm left with negative 5x equals negative 10. Opposite of multiplying is dividing, and you have to divide by the exact coefficient so that negative 5 divided by negative 5 gives you positive 1, and this gives you positive 2. I'm going to do my check in blue this time because it didn't change. All right, I'm going to recopy, but I'm going to do negative 5 times 2. When I'm replacing my variable, I always replace it with parentheses. Plus 8 equals negative 2. This is negative 8. Negative 10 plus 8 is negative 2, so that does check. I hope yours checked. Next one, we're going to find our variable. This time I see, I wish I could change this to purple. For some reason, I can't get it to change. I want it to be purple. I don't know what its problem is. Oh well. I see a negative 2 here, so I'm going to add 2 to both sides. That leaves me with 2/3 W equals 12. And again, I could divide by 2/3, but I know that I'm going to have to copy, change, flip. So my little trick I'm going to use is to multiply by the reciprocal, because when my 3's cancel and my 2's cancel, I'm left with W. And if I multiply by that reciprocal over here, put this over 1, I can cross divide both by 2, and 6 times 3 is 18. Oh boy, I better check that because that looks messy, doesn't it? Let's do a check. Negative 2 plus 2/3 times 18 equals 10. Order of operations says that I have to do my multiplying first. So I'm going to put my 18 over 1. 3 divides into 18 6 times. So this is negative 2 plus 12. Different signs subtract, and I do get 10. I find this so fun, and I hope you do too. Look at all the work. And I know a lot of you think the check is a waste of time and stupid. But again, it's part of a process. And if you look at the last page of the notes, you're going to say, oh, I think I'm going to listen to her process because I don't know how to do this one. Okay, so stick with me. We'll get there. And you now can do the homework for lesson 0, I believe this is. Yes, lesson 0.